Did I really say something so terrible, or was one tipsy joke at a birthday dinner just too much honesty for a man who could never handle the truth? I thought laughter was my right, and I thought the people who loved me would understand. But when Aldrich walked out of that restaurant without looking back, and the table stayed so carefully quiet, I started to wonder whether a joke had just become something else entirely. What I did not know was that his best friend had said far more than I thought he would, and by the time I was standing at a charity gala holding an auction paddle with my name on it, the only thing arriving at my table was the one thing I had never once planned for. My name is Vesper Column. I am 31 years old, and I coordinate events at the Avery Gallery, seasonal openings, corporate nights, charity fundraisers, the kind of evenings where the right music and the right light make people feel like they understand art even when they do not. I am quick with language and fluent in rooms, and I had always believed that reading a space was one of the more useful skills a person could carry. My husband Ald was an industrial designer who worked with ergonomic systems and functional packaging components, and I had spent a considerable amount of time explaining to people at gallery openings that his work was important but not particularly visible, the way infrastructure is important but not particularly visible. I told myself this was an honest description. The Avery Gallery's quarterly opening finished at 9:30 on a Thursday in October, and the after-hours drinks on the rooftop lounge stretched past 11. The rooftop had outdoor heaters that released a smell of cedar and warm metal into the clear air, and string lights on tensioners that swayed slightly with the wind. I stayed later than the other coordinators because Oren was there. He was a freelance sound engineer who had designed the gallery's new installation, a 19-minute ambient coastal loop that the director had commissioned for the autumn show. And after the guests cleared, he stayed to manage the overnight equipment protocols, which was his professional procedure and also a reason to be in the building past 11 on a weeknight. He talked about how frequency shapes the feeling of a room before anyone has consciously heard anything. And I listened with my whole attention on one person, which is not the same as being present, but feels identical from the inside. I had saved his contact as a double moon emoji 2 weeks earlier, and I had stopped asking myself why. When I came home, Ald was in the kitchen making chamomile tea. He set a second cup on the counter without asking, and then asked how the opening had gone and whether Oren's installation had been well received. He said this easily, mentioning that the gallery's tagged story had come through his feed, and the credit post had listed Oren's name, and the rooftop photos had shown us in the same frame near the parapet at 11:15. He asked whether these late closings had become a regular pattern because the last 4 gallery evenings had all extended past 10:30 when Oren was the installation consultant, and the previous 4 had not. He said he was asking about Clem's bedtime logistics, not about anything else. His second question came in the bedroom, quieter, no accusation, asking whether everything was generally all right, because over the past month he had noticed the evenings running later and her phone face down at breakfast and a quality of her being somewhere else while still in the room. He said he would rather hear it plainly than assemble it from other sources. I told him that a husband who cross-referenced social posts at midnight had run out of real concerns, and I turned off the lamp. The following morning he was at the hallway desk reviewing a design specification when I came through with Clem's nursery bag. He confirmed the pickup logistics, then added quietly that he wanted to have one honest conversation at some point soon. Not about the gallery opening, not about any specific name, but about whether the house felt the way it used to feel when they were both in it. He said the texture of the mornings had been different for 2 months, and he would rather ask plainly than sit with an answer he had assembled alone. Clem appeared at the top of the stairs with one buckle undone, and he reached up to meet her on the 3rd step without stopping the conversation, which was something I could not have done at the same moment and did not acknowledge. I told him that men who described marriages using structural metaphors probably preferred objects to people. I left for the gallery. That evening his phone lit briefly on the desk, with a notification from a contact labelled as a small compass rose emoji, a contact I had not seen on his list before. The preview showed only a location and a time. Pembroke Centre, 2:30 p.m. He dismissed it with one tap, and the screen went dark. On a Wednesday morning, while reviewing the charity gala catering file in my gallery office, a joint account alert appeared for a $63 charge at Strand Sound and Systems. I set my phone down and continued working. That afternoon, Ald asked about the vendor, noting it was in Orin's building and questioning whether the purchase was for the gallery or something personal. He said he was reconciling expenses. I replied that it was a gallery expense. That was true about the vendor, but not about that purchase. Then I went to see Marisol. Her studio smelled of clay and espresso. I explained the past 2 months as I had come to understand them. Ald had become focused on receipts and structure, and the gallery required flexibility he didn't understand. She listened quietly, then asked if Orin had become more than professional. I said labels didn't matter. She set her mug down and didn't touch it again. That evening, Ald was waiting in the kitchen. Between us was Clem's drawing, our family, and beside it a tall figure labelled in careful letters, Mummy's friend Musik. He said Clem had described the man herself. Then he mentioned the charge. The gallery used invoice accounts, he explained, which meant the purchase was personal. He asked me to name the item or show a purchase order. He also suggested dinner. No phones, just honesty. I told him auditing receipts wasn't marriage. Then I put Clem to bed. She asked if Daddy was upset about her drawing. I said no, just tired. She accepted that too easily. Later I saw Ald in his study writing dates in his notebook. He didn't hide it. I said goodnight. The birthday dinner was in 5 days. I confirmed Orin's seat beside me. The alcove's private room held one long table and 8 chairs under a low pendant light arrangement, and the gardenias Pren's partner had arranged in the centre released their heavy, close scent into warm air that had been building since the kitchen opened. Candles in clear glass holders were already lit when we arrived. Ald and I came in the same car, 7 minutes of drive during which I checked the charity gala catering invoice on my phone, and he drove without commenting on this. Orin was already seated, having cycled and arrived early, and Ald greeted him with the warmth of 4 years of friendship, the handshake that pressed into a brief shoulder hold, a quick real question about how the coastal installation had been received. Orin responded easily, and I watched the two of them with the particular measurement I had been carrying for months, as though the distance between them was something I had invented and was now obliged to maintain. Uncle Gregor settled at the far end of the table in a dark jacket and placed his small cloth-bound notebook beside his plate with the casual ease of someone who had carried one for 4 decades without making an event of it. He accepted a glass of white wine and said very little, and watched the table the way a person watches something when they are paid, professionally and for a long time, to notice what other people miss. The first hour was ordinary and warm. Pren's partner told a long story about a birthday cake and a bicycle courier, and the table contributed and laughed in the easy rhythm of gatherings where the social temperature is right. I had 3 glasses of wine before the main course arrived. Ald had one, because he was driving, an offer he had made without being asked, which I narrated to myself as a performance of virtue rather than actual consideration. The conversation turned to Orin's work during the main course, and at one point he reached across the table for the bread basket and said something self-deprecating about being better with sound than with words. The table laughed. I was on my 4th glass, and I said it in the carrying voice I used for gallery introductions, the voice that reaches the back of any room. I said that Orin was better with everything than Ald ever managed, and paused just long enough for the phrase to settle, and added that this included certain parts of their house that Ald did not seem to know about anymore. I set my glass down with the half-smile of someone who believed the room was with her. The table produced a sound that was part laughter and part something else. The two nearest guests gave the reflexive response of people still processing what they had heard. Pren's partner laughed once and stopped, and the remaining four did not laugh at all. The gardenia scent thickened in the warm air. Marisol's glass was halfway to her mouth and she set it back down without drinking. Ald's hand, resting near his wineglass, went flat on the tablecloth. He held still for exactly as long as it takes to fully understand a sentence. Then he folded his napkin, placed it beside his cutlery, excused himself in a quiet and level voice that could have been going anywhere, and walked through the private room door. The table held its shape for 6 seconds. Marisol looked at her glass. Uncle Gregor's pen made a small mark in the cloth notebook. Pren looked at the tablecloth between the candles. I raised my wineglass and said the birthday celebrations should continue, and the delivery of the next dish gave everyone something to do with their hands. I found Ald on the smoking terrace, a small concrete patio with 3 ashtrays and a wall of climbing ivy cut back for winter. He was looking at the narrow street below the railing. He named it exactly, the parts of their house that Ald did not know about anymore. He asked what room she was describing and said this was not rhetorical. It either had an honest answer or it did not. The climbing ivy was bare at the tips, and the cold off it mixed with the candle smell drifting from inside. He said the table's 6-second quiet was not the reaction of people who had heard a remark about gallery acoustics, and he asked whether her reading of that quiet matched his. I told him that men who required explanations for their wives' sense of humour had a control problem rather than a humour problem, and I went back inside. In the parking lot at 10:45, after Pren and his partner had said goodnight with the careful warmth of people who were not going to address the evening directly, Ald made one more attempt. The lot was lit by a single tall lamp that turned the cars amber. He stood near the driver's door and asked, in the quietest register of his voice, what he was supposed to do with the phrase she had used, because if it was genuinely about gallery acoustics, there was a context for that which he was ready to hear in full. He said the cracked champagne coupe the server had replaced twice during the main course established a drinking timeline for the evening he was trying to understand. He asked directly whether Orin had ever been inside their home, and on which occasion, and for what reason. He said he was asking plainly and would receive the answer without raised voice. I said interrogating his wife in a parking lot at 11 at night revealed more about him than about her, and I got into the car. He drove us home without saying anything more, and from the motorway junction onward, his expression was the controlled flatness he used when precision mattered more than feeling. He checked on Clem without coming to the bedroom. The spare room door closed softly. My phone had 3 messages from Marisol. The first said she hoped I was all right. The second said the table had been very quiet after the comment. The third said she was going to sleep. She had not said I was right. Uncle Gregor's notebook had 1 new page of entries when he arrived home that night, written in unhurried handwriting. The phrase, the table's response, the time Ald had excused himself, the time Vesper had returned and raised her glass. He wrote without embellishment, because embellishment had never been his professional habit. The following morning, the Alcove restaurant's main line appeared in Ald's call history at 7:45, not to ask about lost property, but to confirm the booking name and the seating arrangement for the previous evening's private room reservation. He wrote the date, the call time, and the table seating layout in his design notebook under a horizontal line. On the Monday after the birthday dinner, I was at the nursery pickup lane at 3:15, a covered lane with painted markers and a low wall. 3 other parents were nearby. Clem came out with her nursery bag and took my hand, and within 2 minutes before we reached the car, she asked whether Daddy was sleeping in the other room because of what I had said at dinner. She said she had heard me come home very quietly, and then no voices, and that sometimes when people were being quiet, it meant something was wrong. I told her nothing was wrong and that Daddy and Mummy were having a busy week. The father nearest us had been close enough to hear the question and the answer, and he did not look at me afterward. I went to Marisol's studio that afternoon. I needed someone to confirm the version, that the birthday joke was natural candor in a social setting, that Ald's exit was disproportionate, and that the evening had been unremarkable to anyone who was not determined to make it remarkable. Marisol made coffee and listened to all of it. Then she said she could only tell me what she had observed, and what she had observed was a table that went quiet in a specific way, and a man who excused himself without drama after his wife said something about another man in terms that were not about gallery acoustics. She said she was not telling Vesper what to feel. She said she was not available to say the table had heard something different from what it heard. I said Marisol had always been too literal for rooms that required flexibility, and I left with my coffee half finished, which she would have noticed. At Delia's catering kitchen that evening, stainless steel surfaces, bundled herbs drying above the prep table, the warm salt smell of a stock pot on the back burner, I delivered the vulnerability I had been building since Monday. I told Delia that Ald had been emotionally unavailable for 3 months, that the birthday dinner had been an awkward moment which he had amplified into a crisis, and that I needed someone who understood that wanting to feel seen was not a character flaw. Delia held my hand and said that sounded hard. Then she asked something I had not prepared for. She said Ald had always seemed like a person who kept his feelings low until they became unmistakable, and she asked whether the birthday dinner might have been the moment they became unmistakable. I said I did not need a psychological reading of my husband from a catering kitchen. She said she understood and refilled my cup. Then she asked, gently, in the way of someone who has known her daughter long enough to know when to press, whether Vesper had told Ald the same version of the past few months that she had just told her, because in her experience, the version a person gave their mother and the version they gave their husband were sometimes the same story and sometimes not. I said of course they were the same, and picked up my cup. The stock pot bubbled once behind her. She did not say I was right, and she did not ask the question again, but she had asked it, and it remained on the kitchen surface between us like an ingredient she had already added. At Bet's house on Sunday, the family lunch occupied the long oak table and smelled of slow-cooked food and children's drawings pinned to the corkboard with the same respect as paperwork. Ald arrived separately. Bet was warm to Clem and precise with me, not cold but efficient in a way that carried its own information. After lunch, in the kitchen while washing dishes, she said one thing without preamble. She had heard a version of the birthday dinner from Gregor, and Gregor was not someone who repeated things unless they were accurate. She said she hoped Vesper understood that Ald had always been the kind of person who absorbed damage without showing it, and that absorbing and accepting had different timelines, and she could not promise anyone how much time was left in the first phase. She said she was not taking sides, and then she handed me a dish to dry and did not ask for a response. Through the kitchen window, Clem and Ald were in the back garden, and Clem was explaining something to him with both hands while he crouched to hear her. That evening, I offered the compromise I had built carefully across the week. I said I was willing to have a proper conversation about the birthday dinner. I could see how the phrasing had landed badly, and I was prepared to say that at dinner, just the two of us, without agendas. The condition was that he first acknowledged the pattern of questions over the past month had created a home environment that did not feel generous. Ald was at the hallway desk, signing Clem's nursery field trip form. He set the form down and said one question had to come first. What did the phrase mean? Because it had a specific referent that was either Orin or it was not, and if she had not intended it as she claimed, she could say plainly what she had meant instead. He offered to attend dinner without conditions if she would tell him one true thing tonight in the hallway that a conversation could build from. I said the one true thing was that I had been unhappy for months and did not know how to say it without an argument. He thanked me for that, and then asked whether the unhappiness existed independently of Orin or whether Orin was part of it, because the answer made a practical difference to what the dinner would be building. I said he was converting a sincere gesture into an interrogation, refusing every peace offering unless it came with complete surrender. I went to the bedroom. Through the wall came the soft press of pen on paper, methodical, unhurried, the sound of someone who had stopped waiting for a different answer. Later that night, I checked the joint streaming account from my phone. It was still active. 3 days later, the home screen showed only one profile. His had moved to a separate individual subscription, processed without notification at some point in the previous 48 hours. The change had been made Tuesday evening at 8:41. I had not been watching the billing app, and the streaming profile had always felt permanent, the way domestic infrastructure feels permanent, until the moment it does not. Wednesday morning, Clem brought a new drawing to the breakfast counter. 3 crayon figures, 1 large, 1 medium, 1 small. The large and small were labelled with her phonetic approximations of their names. The medium figure had no label. Ald looked at the drawing, then at me, then looked away and said goodnight to Clem before catching himself and correcting it to good morning. He picked up his design bag and left for work without commenting on the drawing. Ald went to Oren's studio building on a Thursday afternoon. Not the main entrance, but the loading bay on the east side, where equipment came and went, and the ambient noise of the street was absorbed by the bay doors. Oren came out when he saw who was there. The conversation lasted 9 minutes. I know this because Oren told me afterward, and the 9 minutes he described confirmed he had said more than he intended. Ald had asked directly and quietly whether the arrangement between Oren and Vesper was professional, and Oren had said yes. Then Ald asked one follow-up question: what the arrangement had been on the Thursday in late September, when Vesper had left the gallery and come home 3 hours later than her usual closing time, specifically that Thursday, because the nursery had sent an unread message about a permission slip that evening, and Vesper had not responded until the following morning, which was unusual against her normal pattern. Oren had been still for long enough that the stillness answered the question. He told me afterward that the conversation had been fine, that Ald had been decent, and that he thought things might be moving toward resolution. I heard in that description the sound of a man who had underestimated the precision of the person he had spoken with. I said nothing useful. That evening, Ald came to the living room after Clem was in bed and sat in the chair across from me. He said this was the last time he would raise the subject as a conversation between two people sharing a home. He named 3 things: the birthday dinner phrase and the table's 6-second quiet, the loading bay and Oren's 9-minute stillness, and the Instagram story captioned people who actually stay in the room, liked within 8 minutes by a contact whose identity was visible on her tagged account. He asked what she expected him to understand from the phrase she had used at the birthday dinner, those specific words about parts of the house Ald did not know about anymore, and whether she could name the room, because every explanation she had offered described acoustic awareness. And acoustic awareness did not require 3 months of extended gallery evenings and a contact listed as a symbol. He asked for one clear answer to one specific question. He waited without filling the silence. I told him that compiling a case from a loading bay conversation, a birthday phrase, and a social caption was not curiosity. It was a concluded verdict in search of paperwork. I said the Instagram caption was about gallery colleagues, and that speaking to Oren outside their shared professional context crossed its own line. He said he heard me, and that he would handle what needed to be handled properly, organised and fair and documented. He said goodnight and went to the Home Office and closed the door. 22 minutes after that door closed, I posted an Instagram story from the bedroom. The photograph was the gallery's lower corridor on opening night. Amber lit, the equipment Oren had assembled visible at the far end in a graceful arrangement of cables and modular components. I captioned it, "The work that stays in the room after everything else has gone." I tagged the gallery account and the installation project. Oren's name was not in the tag, but he was identifiable to anyone who had attended the opening, and the caption was directly readable as a response to the conversation I had just had. I posted it knowing Ald followed the gallery account because performing visibility felt the same as owning a situation, and the story was the one space left where an audience still responded with warmth. Oren liked it within 5 minutes. Marisol opened her messages to me, saw the story notification, and closed the app without typing anything. Bet saw it at 11:40, took a screenshot, and sent it to Ald with one word: confirmed. The following morning, the nursery school communication app showed a change. Clem's emergency contact had been updated. Ald's number remained primary, my number had been moved to secondary, and Bet's number had been added as tertiary contact. The change was timestamped at 8:43 p.m., while Ald had been in the Home Office with the door closed. In the Home Office that afternoon, the rubber-banded notebook was gone from the desk. In its place was a dark canvas document sleeve sealed with a press stud clasp, with a sticky note on the front that read, Avery, Thursday. The charity gala I had organised was on Thursday, and it was on the shared calendar with full logistics. His banking direct deposit co-account alert arrived that evening. His personal deposit had been rerouted to a separate account, effective the current pay cycle. The joint account still showed his contribution for bills and Clem's nursery. Everything else had moved, processed Tuesday afternoon, while I had been in the gallery reviewing the gala catering file. On Wednesday, I was passing through the Hospital Corridor Cafe, a gallery commission delivery check near the Pembroke Centre, when Ald came from that direction. The canvas sleeve was under his arm. He gave the brief nod of someone managing the space between two people correctly, and continued toward the exit. The corridor smelled of reheated soup and the blandness of a building where nobody stays. 2 days later, Clem's nursery teacher confirmed through the app that the emergency contact for the gala week was listed as Bet Column, a change made while I was at the gallery reviewing the auction table floor plan, looking at paddles numbered 1 through 8, and not watching the nursery app for administrative changes. That evening, Ald came to the hallway where I was sorting the shared mail and said one practical thing. Clem's Thursday nursery pickup would be managed by Bet because he had an appointment during that window, already confirmed with her. He said the appointment was at the Avery Theatre at 3:15. He knew the charity gala was on Thursday because it was on the shared calendar. He took his portion of the mail, put it in the canvas sleeve, and said goodnight. Through the closed office door came the soft confirm chime of a file successfully sent to a cloud account. And then, nothing. On Thursday morning, the charity gala event schedule I had printed for the Avery Theatre team was on the kitchen counter where I had left it the previous evening. At the bottom of the page, below the silent auction setup times, Ald had written a single line in pencil and then tried to erase it. The pencil letters were gone, but the groove they had pressed into the paper remained. Avery, auction table, 7:30. The erasing had not removed the shape of what had been there. The Avery Theatre's main ballroom had a high Victorian ceiling and a wide oval floor, and the charity gala setup ran from 2 p.m. to 5:30. I had organised the silent auction table arrangement myself, 8 item displays along the left wall, each with a numbered bidding sheet. The florist had placed gardenias in the table arrangements at each end of the display because I had specified them as part of the gallery's visual language for the season. The same heavy white flowers from the Alcove restaurant's birthday dinner. I noticed the connection and did not linger on it. Uncle Gregor arrived at 6:12 in a dark jacket, accepted his paddle, number 11, and moved to the right side where the charity board members gathered. He saw me and gave the nod that means we will speak later. Marisol had replied with a polite regret, prior commitment, and the regret had arrived the same morning the Instagram story had gone up. The silent auction opened at 7. I was at the table alcove, a slightly recessed section of the left wall with a directional lamp above each display, reviewing the final item placements and confirming the bidding sheets were correctly labelled. The paddle in my hand had my bidder number printed in clean black on white. Number 4. At 7:22, a man in a plain charcoal jacket, approached the silent auction table without a bidder paddle and without browsing the auction items. He asked for me by my full legal name, which I confirmed in the automatic way I confirmed my name at professional events. He placed a sealed envelope and a stapled document set on the silent auction table beside the nearest item display, stated his role clearly and without ceremony, and named the filing, a petition for dissolution of marriage registered with the family court that morning, with temporary financial and property orders already in effect, and a first hearing date confirmed on the cover page. He noted the time of service on a pad and stepped back from the table. The directional lamp above the display lit the edge of the envelope in clean white. The gardenia arrangement at the nearest table end released one heavy pulse of scent as a guest moved behind me. I was holding paddle number 4. I set it on the auction table surface and opened the envelope. The temporary financial orders named a freeze on the joint account effective that morning. The joint card charge at Strand Sound and Systems was listed in the appendix, itemised by date. The evidence summary included a signed written statement from Orrin Tate, produced after a second meeting with Ald's legal representative the previous Tuesday. The statement confirmed the arrangement's nature and duration. Below it, a printout of the Instagram story with timestamp, account name, and Orrin's like in the activity log. Below that, a printed copy of the text exchange between Vesper and Marisol, including 3 exchanges in which Vesper had described the arrangement directly while framing Ald as emotionally unavailable, provided by Marisol to the legal process. Below the thread, a single handwritten page signed in Uncle Gregor's even and experienced hand, the birthday dinner, the phrase she had used, the table's reaction, the time Ald had excused himself, the time Vesper had returned and raised her glass, dated the morning after, written without embellishment. The final document was the nursery emergency contact modification record, time-stamped 8:43 p.m. I looked for Ald across the ballroom. He was not there. He had never been on the guest list. The service had been arranged for the evening, during the event I had organised, at the table I had placed. I told the theatre's assistant coordinator there had been an administrative delivery, and I needed 2 minutes. She said, of course. I went to the lobby and called Ald. He answered on the second ring. Level, organised, not cold, not warm. He said his legal representative would be in contact with any representative I appointed, that the hearing date was on the cover page, that Clem's schedule was in the second attachment, and that Clem was fine. He hoped I would read the full document carefully. He said good night. Uncle Gregor came through the lobby on his way to the cloakroom, saw me with the envelope, and gave me the long measured look of a man who had written down everything he knew and handed it to the right person. He said nothing and went to collect his coat. I went back to the ballroom. The silent auction was still running. The auction paddle was on the table where I had set it down. I picked it up. Thea, at the drink station, saw me approach, and I said there had been a personal matter, and I was managing it, and the event would continue without disruption. She said of course and refilled her glass and did not ask what the personal matter was. The event continued. The keynote began at 8. The ballroom filled with the warm, half-attentive quality of 200 people who had come to support a cause they believed in, and nobody was watching me with the intensity I had always relied on rooms providing. Standing at the silent auction table with the petition in one hand and the bidder paddle in the other, I understood, in the flat and clear way that understanding arrives when the room has stopped responding, that what I had believed was power had been the exact material that completed the record. I had made the birthday dinner joke because I believed the audience was mine, and that laughter and social warmth were the same instrument as control, and that a man who walked out of a restaurant parking lot without a scene was managing his own insecurity quietly. I had posted the Instagram caption because performing visibility felt the same as owning a situation. What I had not understood was that the birthday dinner phrase, the loading bay conversation, the Instagram story, Marisol's text thread, and Uncle Gregor's handwritten account had all travelled in the same direction. Not toward an argument that could be won in a room, but toward a record assembled with no audience at all. I had needed rooms. He had needed accuracy. And accuracy, unlike a room, does not require anyone to be watching. 7 days after the gala service, the joint card was declined at the pharmacy on the same street as the gallery, and she paid from the personal account without looking at the cashier. Marisol's final message arrived 4 days later, a short, warm sentence about hoping she was doing well, without anything following it, because there was nothing more to include. Orin's studio website removed the Avery Gallery testimonial from its client section. Clem asked on a Wednesday evening whether Daddy would come to the nursery's autumn show, and Ald replied directly to the nursery app with his attendance confirmation before Vesper had found the same message. The charity auction paddle with bidder number 4 was in a box near the hall table, placed there the night of the gala and not yet moved. The bidding sheet for the item she had been reviewing when the service arrived was still in the gallery's auction records. Her number registered against a hand-thrown ceramic piece by an artist whose name she could read without thinking of Marisol. She always did anyway.